Hey, welcome back to another week of Behind and Beyond. I'm Allison, and this week I get to sit down with Pastor Scott Stevens as we talk more about his sermon from this past Sunday. He's going to spend a lot of time talking through two of his biggest passions, the development of young leaders and young believers in the local church, and also cultivating hearts of generosity within communities. And then he also lets us in on some of the behind-the-scene moments of some of the greatest acts of generosity he gets to see because of his role. It's a great conversation. We look forward to you joining us. Hey, Scott. Welcome to Allison. Behind and Beyond. Excited to have you here. I think we were just talking. This might be our first time, but maybe not. We're not totally sure.
I think it was, and you think it wasn't. You think we did one? I think
and
I'd go with your mind rather than mine. I probably just forgot.
I'll bet you like a cheeseburger, and if I'm right, you owe me a cheeseburger. Right. If you're right, it would change your life. Is that what you said?
No, this must have changed. It changed my life. Like doing that first podcast with you so much. It was so impactful in the spring
that you forgot it completely.
I can't remember whether we did or not.
Obviously.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you here. Either way, it has been a very long time. So it's great to have you here today and this fall. Any highlights from this fall for you? What has been something just fun, kind of personally, before we dive in?
We took the grandkids to the zoo a couple weeks ago. And I don't think I'd been there since like our girls were little. So maybe like 20 years, maybe.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed much.
It hasn't.
No, they need to put a little money into that place.
They are. Do you know that? They're doing like a whole big renovation.
Oh, good.
It just came out.
Because I think it was the same animals. Like, I remember you, dude. You're 20 years older now. You have some gray-haired and gorilla. I don't know. I was like, wow, yeah, that's nothing's changed.
They added there's like a islands area that's new-ish, I think.
Oh, I missed
maybe.
That. Island?
With the sand. Did you see the big sand pit?
Oh,
maybe you didn't make it that far.
We went all the way. We did the big loop thingy.
It's like back behind, but you have to kind of go left. So maybe back behind the gorillas.
Oh.
Yeah.
I might have missed it.
Maybe. Okay. Do you have a favorite animal there?
No.
I'm
not much of a zoo person. I like to go in the fall, though, because then go in the summer, it just stinks.
Yes.
Like, right? Come on.
Yeah, it's hot and very crowded.
Yeah. So this was sort of nice. It was a nice day. It was chill.
I live right by the zoo, so that's why I know so much about the zoo. Yeah, it's in our backyard, basically.
I think we had a pass for a couple summers when the girls were little, so we would go over a lot. But
yeah. Great.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what else happened this fall.
That's it. Well, the zoo is a great thing to do. Yeah. Okay. Well, as we dive in to the sermon, it was great to hear you get to preach this weekend and talk about your work also with interns and young leaders. And I know I have also benefited from some of your work with young leaders. And so I'm excited to talk to you today about kind of this you kind of got to talk about the two things that I feel like I know from you are very big passion points in your life: young people and money. So generosity is what I mean. Yes. Yeah. So it is Behind and Beyond. So one of the first questions I always ask is kind of what was some of your thinking going into the sermon? What was there anything that you had to cut that you didn't have time for that you'd like to talk about here?
Probably a lot that I had to cut because like we had that video and it was 5 minutes and I wanted to make some space for the campus pastors to talk about some of the things that are happening at their location. So I was looking back in my notes yesterday just to sort of see what didn't make it. One was those surveys and studies. I had a lot of information. I think I just mentioned it briefly like at the end, but there's a lot of like data out there that's not, it's not church-based or Christian-based or tithing-based. It's just based on studies that organizations have done about this topic of people that are generous with their resources. They're just generally healthier, like they live longer. They're less stressed. They're less medicated. They are, typically deemed as content and happy. So I could have pulled some of that apart. There was a scripture between the two scriptures, the storing up treasures in heaven, and then you can't have two masters. In between, Jesus talks about the eye, light, and or it could be darkness. And so I studied that for a bit. Like scholars sort of are a bit all over the place on where he was going with that. I think I landed that it's pretty straightforward. I think it's just a metaphor for the heart. He was using the eye instead, and he was talking about, if our eyes are constantly focused on bigger and better things, bigger cars, bigger homes, bigger land, bigger deals, then it's going to allow darkness, and versus focusing on the people in front of us and being content. So there was a quote that I heard a long time ago, show me your habits and I'll show you your future. So I was really wanted to put that in there. So that was something that just didn't make it, because I do think like once we become habitual about giving, about generosity, about not constantly focusing on the next big thing or the next great vacation or the next thing that I'm going to spend a lot of money on, I think it does create like a light for your path. So I think that's where he was going in the middle there, and I just sort of focused on the bookend scriptures instead of the one in the middle there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for jumping in on that middle section. I think that's kind of a little bit of an obscure.
It is.
I don't know. Maybe it's really obvious, but somehow we just kind of, I feel like I've heard a lot of teaching on the first section and then kind of the back section, but that is kind of an obscure middle spot. So I think that's really helpful.
I think it was a bridge just for him to move us to the heart.
Yeah.
Like you cannot serve both. Your heart's not going to allow that. So I think it was a bridge to his audience that day to really drive home that point.
Yeah. Why do you think money is so hard to talk about? You said even in your sermon, let me see, I wrote it down. You said 2,000 times, about 2,000 times that possessions or money is mentioned or generosity is mentioned in scripture. And so you even said that would be like 25% of our sermon should be about this.
Yeah.
And yet it's kind of, we all know that it is like, don't bring a friend on money talk weekend, or do not, there's this kind of general joking but sense of like, oh, here we go talking about money. Why do you think we're so uncomfortable with the subject?
Yeah, that's good. I think one, it's just so personal, right? Our money's just so personal to us. Mm-hmm. And then I think, so I sort of think a couple things here. One, that. Two, I think we all bring a history. Like some of us just have such baggage based on maybe how we grew up. I know in our household, my parents were divorced and dad was sort of in and out and then sort of gone. So there were seasons where we had like a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Like he was a car dealer. So there was these seasons, like I just remember Christmas being like, I got a motorcycle. Like, like, wow. And then other Christmases, like I got 8. A sweater. Like, that was so.
Yeah.
So that's sort of maybe my baggage, but everybody has like a history when it comes to it. So I think that's a piece of it. And then I think it's just so like easy to rationalize not giving, or not being generous. I think, there's that scripture, like Old Testament, Moses goes up on the mountain and he comes back down and, they had taken all this jewelry and melted it into this golden calf. And like, they went completely off the rails. And when he confronts them, like they're almost like, well, we don't know what happened. We just like threw this jewelry into the fire and out came a calf. Like that's a complete rationalization, right?
Yeah.
But I think we do the same thing when it comes to giving. Like, well, we can easily deflect. Well, you don't understand my debt situation, or you don't understand, the some of the things that we're doing with our time. And so therefore, like so that everybody just can rationalize it away, and they don't want to be confronted with the biblical narrative of generosity. So, I think those are a couple things that just make it.
It immediately makes me think of just my basement filled with random junk and like, how did this get here? I don't know. Who bought this stuff? Like, how did this end up? Like, if I don't need another random, wreath to hang on my door or whatever. Like, it's just accumulating stuff, and it's kind of a way to, I don't know, it just makes me want to be more thoughtful about what I'm accumulating and what I'm doing with my money. Because it feels like maybe just a $15 wreath from Target, but it just, all that stuff adds up. And then suddenly you've got a basement full of junk. Yeah.
And then I think like finances are one of the main reasons couples have conflicts. Like it's often what lands them into a counseling situation or into like a marriage that's struggling, because they bring different perspectives in, and this one might be a saver and this one might be a spender, and this is so. I think there's just a lot of reasons that cause when the church gets up and talks about it, we feel like we've stepped over a line. Like, oh, now
it feels really personal. There. Yeah. What would you say to people who this conversation is really hard because of hurt, not just from maybe the way they grew up or like a lack of money in their own life, but maybe they felt like they've been manipulated to give at some point, or they have had an experience where maybe they felt like their generosity was abused, and are kind of carrying some of that baggage into the conversation.
And that's real, right? I mean, it's in the news. Churches do shady things. So I think that's very real. I know for me, well, one, just being so connected, obviously at Northway, I see the independent audits that we do and go over and above with the ECFA to make sure that our books are right and that we're doing what we said we would do with people's resources. So I'm comfortable that way. But like, I also, like years ago, I feel like that my obligation biblically is to give to where I'm being spiritually formed, and that's the church. And then I feel like that then I fulfilled that. So now it's not on me, it's on the church or who I gave that to steward it well. I still did the right thing. God will have to deal with them if they do the wrong thing once I did the right thing. Once I did my thing, now does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I think there's a freeing, at least for me, that I've done some, if I want to be generous in an area, I've done the research and I feel called, prayed about it, then I'm done. And if they misused it, then I'll feel sad, but that's now going to be a God thing.
Yeah. I think about that even in generosity, just within the community, as I'm walking down the street and someone asks for money, of course, I don't know. I feel like there's discernment and then there's the Holy Spirit, of course, that you should listen to, but there's also a sense of like, I don't know, at the end of the day, it's not really up to me to decide what they do with this. But if I have the means to be generous and kind and see somebody and speak worth into their life, like, then I need to be open to potentially doing that, And so it's a similar idea.
So good. Probably a way better analogy than mine, right? Like, if you just give that money, if they go and do something foolish with it to continue their spiral or whatever, that's, you can't do that. You did what you felt, what your heart was telling you, maybe what the Spirit nudged you to do in that moment then. Yeah.
And you say all that, also saying that Northway has all kinds of regulations in place and that we are very responsible with the, what is it called? The Evangelical Financial.
I don't know what the ECFA stands for. Christian Fellows something. But they're national. They audit a lot of nonprofits. You elect to use their services, but once you do, you say yes, you open it all up. They then have to, or they're not going to do it. They have to be able to see. So that's every other year we go through that process with them. So if you see that tag on something, you can typically feel really good about it. That means they've been pretty thoroughly vetted.
And that they're choosing to enter that process.
Yes.
Yeah, for accountability. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but like I said, this sermon was a little bit of the intersection of your two passions.
Yeah.
So let's ask a question maybe about that. This is kind of a two-part question. If you were speaking to a 20-year-old or maybe a college student, what two pieces of advice what's one, just spiritually, the first piece of advice that or the one piece of advice you'd want to give them about having longevity in their relationship with the Lord, about kind of running the race well and continuing to walk with Him for the long haul? And then the second part is maybe more on the financial side. What would you advise them around generosity?
That's really good. The running the race, the spiritual side. I have a I definitely have a clear number one thing that I'd say here, but there's so many, right? I mean, like, I don't know. But for me, it'd be like choose your friends wisely and choose your spouse wisely. Like, if you're a young person, like who are your friends are often some of the biggest voices in your ear, and are they leading you in the ways of the Lord, or are they leading you not, leading you in a different direction? So you can pick your friends, like particularly your best friends, or the people you're going to be closest with. You don't necessarily pick your workmates or, other spots in life, but you do get to choose who are your best friends. I have several guys that, that I get together with as consistent as possible. I have lots of people I could get together with, but I have a couple people that I choose to get together with, and know that we're going to talk about, how's things going, marriage, faith, lots of the kids, so choose them wisely. And then I think same thing with your spouse. Like, I really believe that find someone that is walking with the Lord, that will always challenge you to not veer off, and to stay involved and stay committed and be prayerful and raise your kids that way. So I think those are two things that I think in the long run. And then the financial side, like I don't know, it's so basic. I don't know. I mean, right? It's give when you're young. Like start when you're young, because you'll most likely be making more money in the future, and that's when it's harder.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, my job, my role at Northway, one of them is the generosity piece. Things like our year-end giving and working with some of our larger givers. And, let's face it, like I told that story, I get real excited when somebody does something huge like that, like a really big check. But, so like if you're making $1,000 a month and you give 100, that's unbelievable. And if you're making $1 million and you only give 1,000, who's the more generous person?
Right.
So like I try not to ever get caught up in the amount. It's the sacrifice. It's the faithfulness. So, to me, that to start that at a young age is a lot easier. To tithe off of $1 million is wow, might be hard, but to start when you're younger, I think I've told this in sermons. Like, to me, my generosity story is one of the biggest things I always say is I didn't get it early enough. I didn't get it till I was in my 30s, and that was a mistake. Like, I wished I'd had somebody explain.
Because then you have a mortgage and kids.
Yeah, it was hard. I'm like 10, but once I did, and I don't mean like more money came to me, but more authority, more responsibility, more wisdom came to me once I started to do that. But it was harder at that age than if I'd have started when I was single and no other obligations
I had a mentor in college who kind of would sit us down and walk us through this process and kind of say, okay, think of what 10%, basically they would set us up and say, what do you think is a okay goal that you could live off of, that it feels like a decent standard of living, that you can provide for your basic needs, and kind of work towards that goal. But as you're working towards that goal and kind of growing in your career, keep that target. Because what happens is our standard of living just continues to grow and grow and grow. And so their advice was to kind of set the idea of what an okay standard of living is, give early and young, work towards that standard of living. And once you hit that standard of living, you can give beyond 10%. You can be over generous. And so you don't need to just keep getting a bigger house and keep buying nicer cars. And, but it'll free you up to even be incredibly more generous. And so as you're kind of setting up yourself and thinking about your finances early, it's really helpful to kind of have a target of this. Once I get to this place, I know I can be responsible, and I'm saving for retirement. I'm doing those responsible things, but then I can go above and beyond even, and have extra to do just kind of lavish generosity for people. And
to lavish a little on yourself now and then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of the freeing things about the tithe or about giving is that then I don't necessarily have to ever feel like, well, like, no, I'm doing what the Lord has asked, and I'm also being generous in other areas when I can. So let's take a sweet vacation this year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not
Yeah.
have to feel like, oh, I could have given that money to the poor, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I think that's the freeing part of giving that people, and I mean, what a great mentor, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
to get that so young. I know for us, for Tina and I, like we've always tried to like not live above our means, like just always, okay, like we could upgrade here, but why? Let's not. And yeah, it's paid off like big time in the
Yeah.
long run.
And I think it's just like a conversation around contentedness and what we really need in this life versus what the world will continue to kind of put in front of us saying we need, and so I know that Zach and I have had to kind of really think through that. Like, what is it we really need, and our kids really, do they actually need a motorcycle for Christmas? Maybe not.
I did.
Yeah. How old were you when you got a motorcycle?
Yeah, it's like 10 or something.
Oh my God.
Like a dirt bike, yeah.
That's terrifying, but very, very cool. I'm sure it was very, very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I think in your role, I know that you get to see generosity maybe in a way that the rest of us don't. I mean, even last week we're talking about don't do your works of righteousness so that others can see it. And so I believe and know enough of our community to know people are being really generous kind of behind the scenes. But you maybe get to see the stories a little bit more up close. I'm curious if there have been just even some really sweet moments of generosity without, giving names or anything like that, that really stand out to you to encourage even our community as we think about ways to be generous.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And Northway, there's some folks at Northway that do it so quietly and so behind the scenes. And, but yeah, there's nothing like a phone call from someone wanting to grab a coffee with me. And they just ask like a couple questions, maybe some of it where I've really seen it pop up, Allison, is in missions. Like, so folks will, have a connection to one of our mission partners or hear something or ask me, is there any specific needs out there? So Northway faithfully gives to multiple partners, monthly. But then they all have projects too that they want to do to further whatever the work that they're doing. And then sometimes they'll make a request to us and we'll try to help in those areas. But there's nothing like a big request where somebody really needs, a mission partner really needs something. I'm talking like that $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 request, and they know they need it. They know the impact it's going to have, and they know it's probably going to take several years to raise that money. And then someone just walks in and says, "Yeah, I just want to give this all to that," and wants to be anonymous. And I get to make the call. I'm to be the hero.
What
to
a
the
fun
mission
job!
partner. I know, exactly. So yeah, those things have happened multiple times. I mean, I told the one in the story, that gentleman seeded that intern ministry. I didn't tell this in the story. That's how we hired Darren Bowers. So, and he came to Northway then as someone who's going to head up and sort of bring organization to our intern ministry, and then also do some work in kids and students. And we wouldn't have been able to do that. I don't know how long it would have taken until and I think it just took that ministry and gave it so much momentum quickly. We were up and running that fall with 2 or 3 interns, and then we just, went from there. So
yeah, that's great. I was sharing a story with you too, even about, I'll just say it here too, because I just think it's like such a sweet, everyday person maybe story that I got to witness. There was a couple in my rooted group who was walking through kind of week 8 where it talks about our finances and being generous. And they just felt like they heard very clearly from God to give a certain number of money out of their personal savings account to another couple in the church that they didn't really know very well, but they knew they were trying to adopt a baby. And this other couple who'd been trying to adopt that same day had just gotten news that they thought they'd hit the full mark of the amount of money they needed. And then that wasn't true. Now there were all these kind of like hidden fees or extra money they needed to have in order to be able to adopt this child. And they were kind of at their wits' end. They just kind of, really discouraged, just felt like we can't keep going. We don't know if we can get this much more money. We've tapped everyone we know to help like with this adoption. And so the couple in my rooted group and just didn't know that they were having that experience though either. They just felt like the Lord said, give this number. And they came to me and were like, can you do this anonymously for us? Give this money to this other couple. And so it was just so beautiful because it was the exact amount that the other couple had heard that they needed in order to be able to adopt this baby. And so those couples don't really even know each other, and now this family has a 6-year-old boy that is going to be in their family forever. Yeah. And so I just think it's so beautiful when people are open to the Spirit.
That's like treasures in heaven, right?
Yeah.
That couple just did. They laid up some treasure in heaven. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And they won't really see, they've since moved to another state. They won't really see.
Someday.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful. Yeah. What are some ways that you think, so that's kind of like an individual level. What are some of the most like generous or exciting things that maybe Northway itself, our community as a whole, have been able to do because of the way people give to our community? That maybe, I think there's a lot of things we do that we don't really talk about, that maybe the congregation wouldn't see. So what are some ways that you've seen us be generous that are special to you?
So many. I think, so when you give to Northway, like what I really like about giving to a church like Northway is that if your heart is for the poor, we have ministries that fuel that. If some of the work we're doing over in East Liberty, if your heart is for after school programs for kids, if your heart is for global missions, if your heart is for this, food bank, I can just go on and on of the things that we're doing so that when you give and you have a hard issue, know that that we're going to direct it off to those areas. But I think that Samaritan's Fund is something that comes to mind when you ask that question. That I've been able to watch and see stories that can't be told from like the platform, because these are folks that are struggling. They're often dealing with like something that maybe they've done that has caused them to put them in this financial jackpot, or something that was done to them. But when Northway can step in and help somebody with a month's rent, or get them access to Giant Eagle gift cards, or pay some utilities that are behind, or help someone get into counseling because of something that has happened to them, they're life changers. They literally turn people's heads that are down and hopeless to up. I've seen like heads come up, like in the grateful hearts and attitudes of those folks. But then it's just like it's an unbelievable like opportunity and blessing for the church to step in those moments. So I've seen Northway write some really big checks to things and do some really big things, and awesome, great. But I'm just telling you that like that $400 that pays somebody's utilities and gets them either turned back on or prevents them from being turned off is special.
That's also super significant in an individual's life as well. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that we get to be a part of that. Well, Scott, I think that's it for us today. It's been great chatting with you. Any last words you want to share to the podcast? You do such a great job
at this. I really like it. I
Thank you. That's a great last word. I wasn't fishing for that.
I get excited to watch them. I'll always think, okay, it's Wednesday, right? Is it that? And then I'm gonna who preached, and so you've been doing great. I think these are really good. Like
thanks.
I always look forward to coming in and doing them. I'm not sure we've ever done one before.
We definitely have. I think I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember. But so thanks. It was fun.
Yeah, great having you. Thanks, Scott.